Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you are tuning us in. Once again, this is Aaron Bloxel with B&B Hockey Talk with my co-host, Mr. Matthew Balzer. Lots to talk about today as we continue our countdown in our 31 teams in 31 days, preview prior to the start of the NHL season, as well as lots of movement, let's say, today in the hockey world. So let's get started with that and start us off.
All right, so there are a lot of players being moved between Chicago and Arizona today. Arizona picked up another contract to get them up from the salary floor. They picked up Marian Hossa, Vinny Hinostroza, Jordan Oosterley, and a third-round pick in 2019 for Marcus Kruger, Mackenzie Entwistle, Jordan Maleta, Andrew Campbell, and a fifth-round pick in 2019, going back to Chicago. I like this move for Arizona. Vinny Hinostroza, he had 25 points in 50 games. Smaller player, but he has some offensive upside. And Jordan Oosterley, depth defenseman. He can be a 6'7" defenseman for them. He had 5 goals, 15 points in 55 games last season in Chicago. The big thing with Hossa's contract is Chicago frees up $5.275 million in cap space that they don't have to worry about for the next 3 years. But the big thing with Arizona getting this is that Hossa was only making $1 million for the next 3 years. But with the insurance from the league, they only have to pay him $200K for each of those 3 years that they have him.
That's a pretty significant move. Allows Chicago to get lots of cap space for some potential signings. I hear rumors that they're going to be still bringing in a defenseman there. We have other signings, of course, today, so why don't we get you to touch on those, along with the arbitration dates have been set.
Yeah, so the big signing is Winnipeg locked up their number one goalie, Connor Hellebuyck. Huge signing, 6 years, with a cap hit of just over $6.1 million. It is interesting with goalies that with their cap hits, how they fluctuate and how teams pay them, like with Price being the highest at 10.5. But mostly goalies come around at the $6 million price range. It's looking like more and more. But Hellebuyck, 44 wins. He was a huge part of Winnipeg getting to that conference final this year. And then also with the arbitration dates, the big one for Canucks fans is Troy Stecher is scheduled for July 29th. And Vancouver can either offer him a 1 or a 2-year deal. Arbitration dates start on July 20th, and they go all the way to August 4th. Some other bigger names I'll throw out there. Jacob Trouba will be the first up on July 20th. Mark Stone is on August 3rd. William Karlsson, August 4th. And Matthew Dumba on the 23rd of July are some big names. And even though I know you said not to touch on it, but Brock Besser was on the ice in Minnesota yesterday. More of a shinny game or anything, but he did get a hat trick and 4 points, and his shot is still there.
That's always good news for Canuck fans, for sure. Where do you see Stecher falling in? I kind of foresee him getting $3.5 million per season for the next, probably a 2-year contract. So a total of $6.5 million, somewhere in there. Is that kind of where you roughly see him falling in?
Yeah, that would be. It's like you have Hutton making 2.8 and Del Zotto's making $3 million. So I would put him around that $3.5 million range. And I think most likely on a 2-year contract.
Yeah, he definitely was one of the better Canuck defensemen last year. And speaking of defense, as we jump into our team of the day, the Buffalo Sabres preview, I was overlooking their defense, and man, I used to think the Canucks had bad defense. This defense is they're so lucky they got a good draft pick this year because they definitely needed him. But let's touch on the Buffalo Sabres, and we'll start off with the forwards. Who do you got as potential line combinations, and where do you see them going?
All right. So first up, I'll touch on who they added this year before, right before. They added Carter Hutton from St. Louis. They made the big Ryan O'Reilly trade with St. Louis, so they picked up Tage Thompson, Patrick Berglund, and Vladimir Sobotka, and they picked up Connor Sheary and Matt Hunwick from Pittsburgh. So getting right into the forwards, the first line I have is Connor Sheary, Jack Eichel, and Sam Reinhart. I think Eichel and Reinhart have shown a good amount of chemistry uh, over the past couple of years. Reinhart needs a new contract for this coming year still. So it'll be interesting to see what exactly he'll get paid. I think he had about 50 points or something like that this past year. Second line.
Of course, the big news there, which we joked about yesterday, was Jack Eichel number change, right? He messed around with fans a little bit on Instagram, and he's changing back to his old number. I believe it's number 9, so he's gone from 15 to 9. So sorry to cut you off, but let's keep going with line number 2 there.
All right. My second line I have as Patrick Berglund, Vladimir Sobotka, and Kyle Okposo. Sobotka and Berglund, both coming over from the Blues, provide a lot more depth for Buffalo from last season, where they were at the bottom of the league in goals for. They only scored 198 goals. So, and Okposo has been dealing with injuries over the past couple years with Buffalo, but when he is healthy, he is a really good player when he's in the lineup. My third line I have as Matt Molson, who I know has been he may be buried back down in the minors, as he still has one more year at $5 million, but he was a point a game down in the American League this year. But I have Matt Molson, rookie and potential Calder potential guy, Casey Middlestat in the middle, and Jason Pominville on his right wing. So Middlestat came over at the end of last season, and he showed that he can produce out there. And having Sobotka and Eichel in front of him will help insulate him. And then the fourth line I have is Johan Larsson, NHL All-Star Zemgus Girgensson, and Evan Rodriguez. Not much coming from their fourth line, though. Rodriguez did have a decent year. I think 25 points in 48 games between the American League and the NHL. So he has the potential to move up in the lineup. And I believe he was a former line mate with Jack Eichel back in college, if I remember correctly. And a couple of other forwards potentially, Tage Thompson, who could potentially get in the lineup, who played about 50 games with the Blues last year. Nicholas Baptiste and Scott Wilson are two other names that can be bottom depth guys.
One of the guys, I'm not sure, did you touch on Alex Nylander? Did you have him in your lineup anyway?
I still have him more as a prospect.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I bring that up is one of the websites that I follow have the lines almost identical to what you have, but they have the second line as an offensive line of Alex Nylander with Casey Middlestat and Kyle Okposo, and then keeping the veterans together, Spodka, Berglund, and Pominville. It'd be interesting to see, because we know they are. I do know that both Nylander and Middlestat are still rookies. Be interesting to see if Nylander can make the jump. I did have Matt Molson also kind of an asterisk, because he did spend the majority of the year on the farm with a $5 million cap hit. It'll be interesting to see if he can get back into the NHL and be consistent. So I don't know if that was more for cap space reasons, or if they were just trying to waive him so they could get rid of him if somebody would pick him up. But they definitely, I think he could probably bring some help to their offense for sure up front. I believe that as well. Their defense, pretty easy to start off at the top there. Another, probably the Calder favorite, I would say, is Rasmus Dahlin, the first-round draft pick from this year. Everybody's calling him a mix of Nicholas Lidstrom and Victor Hedman. Hedman and Carlson, I think they're calling him a mix of. Highly offensively skilled. And I've got him paired with Ristolainen, who is also very young and has a lot of, I think he was Buffalo's top defenseman last year. He's come a long way, and he's still pretty young. He's still going to make a lot of heads turn there. But after that, it drops off pretty dramatically. My second pairing is Marcus Scandella and Nick Boylieu. And then Matt Hunwick, who, like you mentioned, they got from the Pittsburgh Penguins, along with Casey Nelson. We've got Brandon Gould and Matt Tennyson as their 7th and 8th, but also on the IR, I don't know if they're going to be ready to play or not, is Jake McCabe and Zach Bogosian. And as we know, Zach Bogosian would be – actually, either one of those guys would be desperately needed. That would probably be their 3rd and 4th defenseman right now, or pretty close to it anyways, if healthy. So they've got 10 guys there to choose from, but they've got 4 or 5 there that are pretty questionable. Could go either way. Some of them could start in the farm. A couple of them, like I mentioned, could start in the IR. But outside of those top 2, it's pretty slim pickings. Anything you want to touch on the defense before we get into the goaltending?
Because outside of those top 2 guys with Dahlin and Ristolainen, even Ristolainen started off pretty slowly to the year last year, but he ended up coming around as the year went along. But Bogosian that was part of that Tyler Myers trade. He just cannot stay healthy to save his life, I think. And even when he is in the lineup, he hasn't been able to produce much offensively with that big cap hit that he has. Jake McCabe is the most intriguing name. He's more of a stay-at-home, but he can bring a physical presence. I forget who he knocked out with a huge hit this year. But yeah, he does bring a physical presence on the back end.
Yeah. So how about those goaltenders? Who do you got?
Yeah. So it'll be an interesting year in net for Buffalo. So they picked up Carter Hutton from St. Louis, who with all his best efforts just about saved the Blues season and got them into that last playoff spot. But yeah, he played in 32 games, had 17 wins. But he had a .931 save percentage, which really helped when Jake Allen was struggling. That he even took over the number 1 role for a little bit over Allen. And their other goalie will be a rookie. He's played a few NHL games over the past couple of years, but Linus Ullmark will be the other goalie. He had 21 wins in 44 games this past year in the American League, and a .922 save percentage. So. His numbers in the American League have been really, really good. And in the NHL, even in small look, he has played really well. But the big thing is how that defensive structure will be in front of these 2 goalies. And then they did sign Scott Wedgwood to fill that 3rd string role for potential injuries.
Excellent. Yeah, that's exactly what I got. That signing from Los Angeles, bringing in Wedgwood for some extra depth doesn't hurt. But I think Hutton's going to really run with the starting job there and hopefully provide some stability for which the Buffalo Sabres haven't seen pretty much since the Dominator retired. Let's talk about they got a couple guys that are still unsigned. Benoit Pouliot, Justin Falk, and Josh Georges. They're all the UFAs. I was looking at that list. I don't think any of them will be coming back, except maybe Kelowna's own Josh Georges. I don't know what his situation's like or if he would come back, but he is a UFA. And what are your thoughts on any of the remaining UFAs that they have, or those particular ones?
Yeah, Georges, I'm not sure if he'll play in the NHL this coming year. He sort of had a falling out with the Sabres as the year went along. Benoit Pouliot, his name is just always out there. It's like he's a frustrating player. It's like he'll provide some offense for a little bit and then he'll do something dumb or he'll just fade away for stretches. But I think a team may still take a shot at him for a bottom 6 role. But yeah, there isn't much there. But yeah, I think their biggest loss was Robin Leonard, who their former GM Tim Murray did go out from Ottawa to get him and gave up a lot, but he just never came around into that number one goalie that they wanted.
Yeah. Let's talk about prospects. I know we've already touched on a handful. They've got two of the favorite to win the Calder this year in Rasmus Dahlin, Casey Middlestat. We touched on Alex Nylander a bit. I don't know Tage Thompson. I don't think he'd be considered a rookie, but he's definitely young. They've got some good youth in this team. But who do you got listed as prospects? They have a deep list, but I only wanted to highlight a few, and I'm sure you've got a few as well.
All right, so one guy they got over in the Evander Kane trade, Danny O'Regan. He had 40 points in 49 games in the American League, and he did get into 21 games in the NHL, but only 4 assists. But that is a centerman that they are high on that they got over from the Sharks. Another guy, Brandon Hickey, who I believe they got in the trade from Arizona, if I remember off the top of my head. Yeah, he played in the NCAA, and I believe he played for Canada at the World Juniors a couple years ago, and he played at the Spangler Cup for Canada as well this past year. That's another good young defenseman, and especially with the lack of depth that Buffalo has, that could potentially crack the lineup. Yeah, Alex Nylander, I have him still more as a prospect. He still only had 27 points in 51 games in the American League. Though with him, he's only been playing in the American League for his development since he's been drafted. So you never know. He could make the jump this year, especially it's like with Matt Molson, as you pointed out, as that asterisk, that he could jump into the lineup.
Yeah.
And my last guy I have is Cliff Pu, who played with London and Kingston last year in the OHL. 84 points in 65 games, and another 17 points in the playoffs as another young winger coming up in their system.
A couple extra guys that I got on my list are Andrew Ogilvy, who was a big signing, free agent out of the NCAA. He may crack the lineup, he may not. He might be more for depth, but they were able to win the sweepstakes on him and sign him. Matthias Samuelsson from this year's second-round pick. I don't normally talk about him, but because they pick so high in the second round, it's like getting a late first-rounder, right? And I know they're pretty high on him. He had a big year. With a name like Matthias Samuelsson, you'd think he'd be playing in Sweden, but he's on the under-18 Team USA program, and they're pretty high on his physicality and the way he plays. And then lastly, in the second round, last year they drafted a Finnish goalie named Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who played over in Finland, who again they have hopes for grooming over towards their farm team eventually to get some ice time in North America here in the next year or two. So potentially down the road, a couple years away, those guys. But they obviously have some big ones like we touched on that are potentially going to make the roster. Will make the roster. I can't see them starting the season without Middlestat and Dahlin at least, and or Alex Nylander. So they've got a lot of youth coming up. They're a team I would watch for. They finished last season with 62 points. Pretty much, I guess that was the worst in the entire NHL, which didn't surprise anybody. Where do you see them with this current roster? Where do you see them finishing? How much more do you see them improving in that point total?
Yeah, I still see them at the bottom of the league. Yeah, they have some pieces, but they're still young, and there's so many question marks still. Like with goaltending, if Hutton and Allmark can step up, and just their defensive play, it's just I can't see them. I think they'll be another bottom 3 team this year once again, which is frustrating for guys in Buffalo fans. But yeah, it will be another rough year.
Yeah, I have them. I think they will improve just with the depth that they got from St. Louis from the O'Reilly trade. If everybody stays healthy up front, they should have 2 or 3 pretty good lines. but healthy being the key word, because as you know, if one or two guys go down with a major injury, like what if Eichel were to miss some time with an injury? I think Buffalo's going to really struggle, but they did finish with 62 points. I do see them getting up towards the 70, 75 point range this year, but they'll still be one of the bottom feeders in the league, and probably one of the front runners for Quinn Hughes' brother, Jack, early on in the draft for next year. So, that's about all we got for today on the Buffalo Sabres. You got the updates on all the happenings around the NHL today. Smash that like button. Comment, who do you think is going to be the most impressive rookie this year? Who do you think is the front runner for the Calder Trophy? Is it going to be Rasmus Dahlin, Casey Middlestat, or is it going to be someone else? Leave that in the comments below, and don't forget to share us, like us, and we'll give you a shout out on the next episode if you share our broadcast. Once again, I'm Aaron Bloxall with my co-host Matthew Balzer. This is B&B Hockey Talk. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and this one's for you, Dad.